Hey, it's Chris. What are we doing today? Ichor and Iliad, the next from Bitewing. They sent me the prototype to talk to you about in these two-player head-to-head games. What do you need to know? How are they? Let's talk. You know. Let's go. Brief snapshot of both of these really briefly. Ichor in front of me is a two-player abstract style in the lines of a Santorini-esque vibe, weight-wise, where you are taking heroes and monsters, traversing them in orthogonal lines across a map that I'll show you in a minute, trying to get all of your tokens down as you slowly go across square by square, putting yours down, pushing other people's off, back and forth until somebody wins. Iliad behind me is in the lines of more of your samurais or your kingdoms, where you are going up head to head with tile laying in a grid with rows and columns 6 by 6, going until somebody fills a row and a column and then scoring it based on the total number in that row or column, as you each have 3 pieces per area. And then you get one of the end scoring positions at either ends of the row or the column in order to set collect to actually win the game at the very end. That brief snapshot aside, let's talk about what Ichor's got going on here. So what you have here is the approach as you're getting ready to play the game. You have your standees representing your monsters and your heroes. You have the cards representing them, as well as your unique tokens that you're going to be laying out. First one to lay all of them out wins. I'm not going to go into all the minutiae and all the rules details. I mean, Kyle from Bitewings did a video for both of these games. It's like 6 minutes each, and they do top-notch work. So that aside, what are the bullet points? Well, what you do is you take from either the monster or the hero deck here 6 random cards. Those are going to be your monsters for this game. And you essentially just lay them out down here along the bottom, but I'll put them right here so they're not out of camera shot, because surprisingly, actually, you don't really need this first row or, so on the either side at the beginning setup. So Hydra, Griffin, Cerebrus, Cerebus, I always screw that up, English teacher mother, Minotaur, Echidna, and Medusa. And so what I do then is I look through my standees and I match, and I put my standees down here that match in the second row. Finish laying them all out here if I can figure out what all of them are. And for illustration purposes, obviously these are going to be standing up. These are the acrylics. They're going to be regular cardboard standees if you don't want the deluxifications. But then I would do the same thing on the hero side of things. I'd, find 6 that matched here, and I'd lay them out accordingly. So with Camera Magic, I now have the hero set up on the opposite side. And so as you're going along, this game is very simple. You do one of 2 things on your turn, and that's it. You move one of your characters orthogonally as far as they can go until they run into a hero. Or you activate one of the powers of one of your heroes or monsters. That's it. The asymmetry of the heroes and the monsters is where this game comes alive. This is going to give heavy Santorini vibes because it's very similar, only you can only use the powers once per game, as opposed to, well, what Santorini does was just being active or all the time. And that's because, again, you have 6 or potentially 7 available to you at any one point of the game. Now, this is not to say that that might be all that you're limited to, because there are several creatures, there are several different types of powers that you're going to get access to as well, maybe here, to allow you to swap them in and out. But that's a whole nother side point. What you're doing, though, is you're gradually just moving them across to where they start to run into people. And then you put down tokens where you started and any spot you crossed over, but you do not put one in where you land. And then your opponent goes. So as we move these cards out of the way, you can start to see what options you have. Now, then if you have somebody like Ares who moves up here, we're laying down 2 this way, and then maybe, Cerebrus goes over there. So you can start to see, again, I'm putting down these tokens. And again, the only goal is to get all these tokens out to win the game. Then Ares, though, and this is what can happen in this game, is Ares can go all the way over here too until the edge. And if you ever run into another person's token, well, you just replace it and they lose it off the board. And if you land on someone's token right here, again, it's just lost. So you can start to see how the board is going to progressively fill up as you go along. And you go until somebody has those tokens out, or until, in theory, somebody can't move any of their roster, essentially. That's it. Now, they say then you can flip it monsters become gods, gods become monsters person, and then you see who has the best of both games combined. Sort of like the football / soccer elimination where they play one home, one away, and then you sum the score up. Well, you do the same thing here. So that's it. Powers, for example, I have lots of variability down here at the bottom. Minotaur, while moving, exit one end of the board and re-enter the opposite side. So if Artemis was out of the way here, I could use his power and go all the way around to here, which would then put pieces here, 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 and here. So things like that are going to allow you to manipulate across the board. Zeus, for example, as well. Instead of moving, place your tokens on all diagonal spaces around. So Zeus just is going to go diagonal there, diagonal there, diagonal there. If Artemis was over there, diagonal there. I mean, so it gives you just ways to put things down when you can mitigate or optimize however you so choose. And I have a huge stack of these cards, as you can see here. Now, I have a total of 12 different ones here, and this includes the extra characters as well. And the extra characters are reinforcements. The reinforcements include one special card as a whole, and this special card in this case is the Caledonian Boar. And each side has one of these special unique cards, because these are only included in the expansion, and these are sort of, well, they're the I win card, as you can see here. Instead of moving, claim victory if there are 4 gods on spaces around, straight and diagonal. So if this thing ever has, of the 8 spots around it, potentially in the middle of the board, 4 gods, it doesn't matter, which gods, if it's surrounded by that, you win, right? Similarly, the one for the gods is if they're surrounded by a certain number of tokens in certain positions. So it's very interesting dynamically manipulation of, I can outmaneuver you in that sense. It's very Santorini in the sense that it is more of an abstract with a slight theme and power asymmetric twist. Is that your ilk? I'll be frank with you. You could play this game very easily without the powers and have it go back and forth as an abstract. And this is the remake of a Tiku, I believe, the previous version without it. And this game is just great from that standpoint, if you're an abstract lover. But if you like asymmetry, if you like chaos, if you like tactically based 2-player games with some spatial elements, this is going to knock it out of the park. At the same time, I'll say, and this is the biggest criticism, right? And this is going to be people's biggest problem whatsoever, right? Even though the powers are, one-time use, right? You've got 6 or 7 of them on the board on a turn-by-turn basis where you're trying to optimize and trying to figure out, again, because there's no limitation of, I can only move the Hydra, and then I have to move the Griffin, and then, some games where they make you move all of your pieces before you move another one, right? And that's not this. It's just go. Maneuver how you want. So can you keep track of all of yours to when to optimally use them? But are you also going to be as aware of your opponents? Because it's not like hidden information, right? You know whose are out there. The game actually gives you 2 cards that say, here are all of the listed powers, give them to your opponent. Okay, great, awesome, fantastic. But that amount of information potentially could lead to some analysis paralysis. And I don't think that's a game issue, right? I think that's a player issue. You have to know if that is this is a problem at my table, this is a problem with how my mind works. Do I like this sort of thing? The other element, or the other chaos in the room that we have to mention, right, is because these are pretty much randomly selected. You can draft if you want to, you can just pick and choose if you want to, but, however you want to do that, the other element of things is just the positioning, right? If you put the wrong one in the wrong column, like some of these powers are going to be better in the middle of the field, right? Zeus is going to be better off in the middle. If Zeus is allocated with that power that I just showed you over to the side, well, 2 of those diagonals aren't even going to be available to him. So if I start him off over there, am I going to have the time? Am I going to have the effort? Is it going to be worth the effort to maneuver him to the center to get his ability? Or am I better off just not having him in here, and I would have been better off with someone else completely different, someone else, like Poseidon, whose ability maybe isn't as dependent on that. And so if you're okay with just the randomization of the placement, or if you're okay with people sitting down and saying, well, I want to make sure that this character is in the middle, and so I'm going to put this one in the middle, again, you can do that however you want on your own table. But those are the issues that I can see people not liking to begin with. But you could play it with the powers, you can play it without the powers. You know, honestly, with just some of the tactics in this is an abstract that is sort of a whoops, you know, sort of like talk, if you will, where all of a sudden you recognize a move that can potentially win you the game and your opponent just completely missed it. That's the nature of this style of an abstract. I mean, just like Santorini. But the nice thing is that with all the stuff that I just said, you know, you play it in 5, maybe 10 minutes at most, and then you play it again. And that's the nature of most abstracts that are this weight, is that it's not designed to be, okay, this one great, outstanding, long-term strategic game, right? It's designed to be, I outmaneuvered you, I out-clevered you this game, and you know what? We're going to play it again because I'll play it 4 or 5 times in the same amount of time it'll take me to play anything of any other style of games and mechanistic approach in the first place. And so does it do a good job with that? Yeah, it's fantastic. You know, I didn't talk about the gates. The gates are optional. The gates are, you know, this is the heavy wood version, by the way. The gates are really nice. The gates are a completely different variant, though. So if we clear off some of the board here, you put down these gates in selected areas on the boards, and you actually have to traverse them, not this way. You actually have to traverse them from one end to the other. And you still get to place your tokens over them, depending on where you are and where they land. But all of these gates are going to give you different ways of manipulating. Some of them will allow you just to manipulate additional spaces on the board. Some of them will allow you to put additional tokens on the gate itself in the middle in order to allocate those. Some will allow you to swap out. Some will allow you just to have, again, an additional layer of craziness. Because if you try and go this way, though, however, you still get to lay the token down, but you can't actually stop there. So that's another thing that's maybe in the way from a spatial element. And if you want more of an open grid, I mean, that's probably the other big criticism I'd say, is it does feel a little crowded at times, especially with the gates, right? And again, it's a minor thing. You know, 6 on each side, 12 spaces of the 36 are taken up by either, you know, the gods or the monsters. So there's only 24 available in the first place. So how are you going to feel like that? Is it going to feel too tight? I'm not going to say knives in a phone booth. That's a stupid analogy. I don't use that on this channel. But that's the feeling that, you know, some of this is going to give. And if you have people that are super strategic and might play a little slower, but let's be honest, if you're not patient like I am, its game's relatively quick. It's painless, and it just freaking works. So again, are some of the powers going to be more to your ilk? I mean, yeah, they probably are. But that's where you're making apple salad out of apples, right? You're taking the 6, 7, whatever it may be in front of you, and you are optimizing it to your heart's content. That is the nature of this style of abstract-esque, and it does a great job at it. There you go. Let's go on to Iliad. The other thing I'll say here as I'm cleaning up, getting the transition to Iliad, is that some of these powers, to be frank with you, with having 12 of them, some of them you're just not going to like. Some of them aren't going to click, and some of them will just not fit your playstyle. And some of them just won't even seem as useful if your playstyle is a certain way. There are several of here that I just don't like using. Period. If you get them, again, is that something you're okay with? Because you may then also run into situations where, you know, I've got 6 of these out and I'm only using, you know, 2 or 3 of them. But to be fair, if you're using all the powers in every game, that's a long game, and ours didn't come anywhere close to that aspect. Clean up, that's what we do. Clean up, do, 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 do. We used to sing that song to my kids to help them get cleaning up because, you know, kids, right, when they're young especially, right? Cleaning up is just like a negative word, and so to get them to do it with like a song, I mean, it's corny, it's cheesy, it's cliche, but there's a reason a lot of kid shows have that in the first place, right? Because it keeps their attention. So camera magic, Iliad. Here's Iliad, right? Tile laying. This is what it looks like in front of you. You have a 6x6 grid with your win conditions set around the outside. 4 tiles randomly placed in the middle. You can see it's blue and red. Correspondingly, blue and red tiles. So all you're doing is you're going until the grid essentially is filled up and all of your tiles are used. And you have tiles numbering 1 to 5 and a Dolos. Dolos is your wild card essentially. We'll talk about that in a minute. As soon as a row or column is filled up, you count up who has what points in said row or column. Winner gets to choose one of the 2 at the ends of whatever one is filled up. That's it. You go until all of them are acquired. Then you figure out who actually won. And the winning scoring condition is a little bit different, and we're going to talk about this first. How you win in this game is you have to have all 5 colors of the gods. or you have to have 2 of the little wedding rings right here and 4 colors. If neither person has that, then you sum total up your points and figure out who has the most. Or if both people meet the same win condition, you also sum them up. And so that's the dynamic that you're dealing with here. And so this is what you're doing, is you're just spatially manipulating based on the numbers that are available to you. The dolos that we talked about a second ago, they are these little symbols here with the little arrows in the upper left-hand corner. All that means is when you place it down, it is the sum total of the 2 on the opposite sides that it is scoring. So in this case, if I placed another blue tile here, the sum of the dolos only when I scored the row would be 6. This is a 6 value tile, which means that this row right now has a total of 6 for blue and 8 for red. And then obviously if 2 more blue tiles got placed down here, it's not the sum total completely of all 4, but in the column now, this is scoring 5. So 5 and 5, that column would be equal right now on either side. You just go until all of these spots are filled. 5s do not have an ability. 5s are just strong. 1 through 4s, though, all have spatial elements that you can do. 1 allows you to manipulate, via the normal placement rules, somebody else's tile. The only placement rule is, essentially, you have to place orthogonally next to another tile that's laid down. And you have to, obviously, as you can see on the grid, alternate every single one. So if I laid this one right here, I would have the ability to manipulate a red tile anywhere I want. And so maybe there was, say, a dolos already out there, right next to my 4, and I don't want that dolos next to the 4 or next to the 5. Maybe I want it over here next to the 1, and now it's only worth 1, and that kind of makes it hard. But don't fear, because if you play your 2, the 2 then will allow you to manipulate your own piece back to wherever you may want more beneficial. That's 1 and 2. 3 allows you to be very clever as well, because you're going to see around the outside here that some of these red ones are -3s, -5s, or even -10 points. And that may not matter if you have all the colors like I mentioned, but -10 points is still significant. So that allows you, when you play the 3, to swap one of these that you've already acquired with one of the ones on the side. One of the wedding bands, say, if I'm going for that, or a 10, or maybe one of the colors I don't have additionally that I need for the Sum of the Gods. And so then I would take that. Well, how do you decide? Well, if I put this 10 back here, right, if we finish this column and we score this column as a whole here, just with randomly placed numbers, we start scoring it. The dolos is worth 5, so 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. 3, 7, 8. So red wins. Red then gets to choose, well, let's see. Do I want the yellow 8 or do I want the red -10? Well, obviously they're going to choose the yellow, and then they get the -10. And you go until this thing is all the way completely filled with those manipulations that I just showed you. 4 is the only other spatial difference, because 4, when you play this, again, these are all optional. You don't have to do any of these. 4 allows you to flip over your own tile that you just laid and your opponent's tile that's next to it there. So now all of a sudden, if that 4 would have been activated there, the sum total of this row is now 4 for blue and 8 for red. So it didn't change the victory there, but maybe blue is playing the long game. Maybe blue said, I don't need yellow. Maybe I've already got one of the yellows, and so I don't need that god color, and I don't really care, but I'm worried more about the white and the red going on this row from that side of things. So that's the game, and you just go. The main caveat to that, though, is that although I have these bags of tiles that I'm pulling from, I actually have, and again, this is a blessing or curse, right? I have 2 of these in hand that are known only to me on a turn-by-turn basis and get replenished every turn after I play one. So I'm always going to have 2 options of what I want to play down on the grid and how I want to spatially manipulate, right? If I don't want to, use my 3 at the beginning of the game when I don't have any of these, so I'm going to use my 2 first. So that power may be less important in that sense. So you're going to go back and forth, again, with that, with known quantities, the same numbers of numerical tiles on both sides. So if you're keeping track, yes, you can start to figure out how many of each people have left, but you still won't know what they're going to play when, because they have those 2 in their hand that they're going to be able to mitigate slight strategy with in the first place. And then the only other caveat that I didn't mention at the end is, let's say you're summing up total points, right? You'll notice that, like I said, for yellow, for example, there are several different tiles. So you don't have to get, just the one that's out there, but you'll notice that all 3 of these have different values. And when you're scoring at the end, you only score the highest valued one. So if I have the 8 and the 4 and the 3, great. Well, I'm going to score the 8. But if I only have the 3 and the 4, well, then I only score the 4. And so you're going to have that same set of number sequences-ish on all of the different colors of the gods. So then it becomes a little bit tougher. And then the ones that are not affiliated with either, like the +10s here, or even the -10s, become a lot more applicable. High risk, high reward, potentially. Is it better to go for these and count on neither of you achieving a sole victory? Or is it better to just say, screw it, I'll take a couple of these because I'm going for sole victory? High risk, high reward. So that's the game. It's very tactical, but it's much more strategic than its counterpart behind me. And that's why at first, you know, we'll talk about pros and cons of this one, and then I'll compare them both and let you know my feelings on both of them. Pro, well, again, you're drawing from a bag. And so you just also, like I said, right, when I just showed the 2 and the 3, you might just get that for the example, and it's not going to behoove you. And so you're going to have to sub-optimally place, but that's why the long-term strategy is also there. The tactically based, play now, but the long-term, I'm going for this row or column later because I already see everything I need to get on the board. So where do I really need to emphasize my row and column attributes? Which ones are more important to me? Which ones can I afford to sacrifice? How smart are you at doing that? That's the big pro. The con, again, I mean, you're just not going to get the stuff you want. You're not going to get the stuff you want. It's going to be too random. There's going to be, when it's too head-to-head, take that. People are going to screw you with your doloses. They're going to screw you with your 5s, and there's not maybe the timing that you're going to have. Or, you know what? It's just going to be completely mitigated where, again, like I said with that example, right? Like, I move the dolos over here, and then I move the dolos right back. So your turn was, you know, maybe helpful, but it was also potentially wasted if I have the ability to just counteract it in the first place. So, again, take that, food for thought. Now, there's not a whole lot else to say. There's not a whole lot of other things to worry about except the randomness that sometimes you'll just end up with, you know, a row or a column that has the same god color on it on both sides. So, I mean, again, that could happen. Or you end up with both sides where the negative is exactly the same. So you can have some inconsequentialities, if you will. I made up that word just for this video. But is that really a make it or break it? I mean, that might be a pet peeve, but no, not really as a whole. So to be honest with you guys, when I played both of these the first time, you know, I surprised myself because description-wise, I was giving the edge by far and away before either hit the table to Ichor behind me, right? No qualms about it. And then I played both of them and I was like, I actually prefer Iliad. It's like, that's a little bit of a chaotic mess. And then I played them more. And I'll be honest, it's probably 55-45 Ichor right now, having played multiple plays. I'm a sucker for a straight-up abstract with asymmetric powers. And, you know, that's my own bias. But this one is going to be probably more solid for a strategy side of things if you're preferring more control. This one is going to have it. You can see the board state at all times and have a great knowledge, potentially slightly more so, well, but also not complete because you don't know what the other person's got left or what that's in their hand, compared to that where, again, even though there's maybe more perfect information on that game, there's also more chaos because you can go in so many directions and manipulate the abilities at such a different amount of time that the predictability is probably going to be slightly less as well, if that makes sense. So as a chaotic neutral player, that's where my bias lies slightly towards. But to be honest, this is no less, and this is probably ultimately going to be something that I feel like more people may actually prefer, just knowing my own predilections versus what other people like too, right? But it's nice because I wasn't expecting the set collection with this one to actually work as well as it did. It makes you gambit, it makes you slightly gamble, but it makes you change your plans as you're going along, as you all of a sudden realize that you can potentially stop them from getting the color that they need, or you all of a sudden realize that both of you have all the colors and you need to go for the points, and now you need to turn on a dime and see what you can do to make work of what's left on the board as a whole. So very, very surprisingly enjoyable from that aspect of things. And again, with Ichor here, I love me some powers, I love me some asymmetry, I love me just some crazy gameplay, and this one just plays a lot quicker. right? Especially if you're not like an analysis paralysis or sit there and take 5 minutes per turn. This one's going to be played probably even 2 or 3 times in the style of this one, because I can see people having more analysis paralysis actually with Iliad, just by the nature of even having 2 choices. I mean, if you look at the adjacent orthogonal spots where I could put, say, the next blue token, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, not including all of the manipulations that might be included in my own manipulating tiles if I laid down a 2, or my opponent's tiles if I laid down a 1, or if I want to flip somebody else's over and optimize things alongside of it, right? That is where the crux of this game could be a little bit more if, again, you know your own table. So there you go. They sent me the prototype copies. Again, these are very, very nice wooden pieces. And I think they have some other deluxeification surprises in store for the campaign. But it's just fantastic table presence, and Bitewing does that with all their games, so that's no surprise at this point either. So prototypes, there you go. Conversations, well, you let me know. How do you feel? Either of these of interest to you? Very, very solid games. So just, again, whether or not they're right for you. If they are, go check them out. Deluxe and a little bit extra content on the crowdfunding page. So there you go. Thank you, Bitewings, for sending it so I can talk about it, and thanks for watching in the first place. That's all I got. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. Clean up, that's what we do. Clean up, do, 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 do. It's my channel. I can do whatever I want on here.